It's entitled, Jesus Blesses Little Children. Then little children were being brought to him in order that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples spoke sternly to those who brought them, but Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs." And he laid his hands on them and went on his way. You may be seated. Now, full transparency, I have not been as nervous to share a message as I am this morning. Partly because I'm generally fairly authentic. I speak from the heart, and I lay everything I have in front of you. This one's a new layer of that. As many of you know, I started out as a teacher, and I became a teacher because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And Stacy and I, early on, we weren't married yet, but I kind of knew we were headed in that direction. And when we were in college, we went with a busload of people out to Urbana, Illinois, to a missions conference at the University of Illinois. And during one of the breakout sessions, it's all about global missions. And during one of the breakout sessions, I didn't know where I wanted to go. Stacy knew she wanted to be a teacher, and so she's like, "Well, join me in this one about being a teacher, being a Christian teacher in what that looks like." And so I joined her, and I had one of those weird, out-of-body experience kind of deals where I was not in that session where that person was talking about being a Christian teacher. I was actually in my classroom, and I was teaching biology to students. And when the session was all done, Stacy was like, "Are you okay?" It was like I was sleeping, but my eyes were awake. My eyes were open. I was awake. But in that moment, what I realized, what God was telling me, was one of the greatest mission fields in this world is our public school system. And so, ironically enough, I became a biology teacher, but I was a missionary for Christ in a biology classroom, which created a lot of great opportunities for great conversations. And so, my mission in life has always been to walk alongside people, helping them to see and become all that God has created them to become. And I started that walking alongside students, kids. And that's adapted over time. I think I've almost followed that generation. As they became parents, then I became a pastor. And so this message today, after last week, we had all these kids up here and we were praying over them. It was just tugging on my heart to share a message about our kids and about our calling with our kids as the church. Not just in America, not just in Lyon County, but in the world today. And so I'm going to pray, and then we're going to jump into this. This is a little different message than I normally give, but let's pray, and we'll jump in. Heavenly Father, I just pray for your words. Help us to hear you. Father, help my words not get in the way of what you have to say and what you are up to in our midst, and how you are calling us to enter in maybe differently. Maybe not differently, but just maybe deeper than we have. And so be with us. Help us open our eyes and our ears, soften our hearts to you. In your holy name. Amen. Now, in my, I'm getting old. So in my 30 years of career, lots of different avenues of career, I've done a ton of research on kids and the church and our responsibility in that. And there's a couple things. Did you know, and this is maybe common knowledge, there are greater numbers of young people are leaving the church and the faith. And those numbers keep increasing more and more. Young people, they grow up, they graduate from youth group, and they leave. There's some statistics. 61% of people in their 20s who attended church growing up. These aren't just 61% in general. This is 61% of people in their 20s that grew up going to church no longer go to church. The church seems irrelevant. They don't see the purpose in church. 70% of Protestants 18 to 30 quit the church or quit their faith by age 23. And 79% of them decided when they were children, yeah, once I graduate, I'm done. What's the point? 80% of people that leave the church decide when they're little. They're just counting down the days till they get to leave because they don't see the purpose. And this is very common knowledge, especially post-COVID. But there is an ever-increasing stress and stress-related illness in children today. Here's some crazy things. They say that children today experience the same level of stress as adults did back in the 70s. So as stressed as adults got in the 70s, that's what children are experiencing today. They're showing more signs of stress and anxiety than child psych patients of the 50s. So the stress and anxiety that our kids are feeling today would have put them in psych wards not, a couple generations ago. And as we all, maybe, hopefully, you realize this, but anxiety and depression has been rising since the 20s. It began to spike in 2012, and with COVID, if an exponential curve can get more steep, it ramped up even more post-COVID within teens. They say as many as 50% of boys and girls ages 12 to 17 are diagnosed with some sort of anxiety disorder. Those are just the ones that are diagnosed. See, and I hear all the time adults say, well, they're just not as tough as they used to be. Back in my day. Life is different today than it ever has been. Every generation, it gets harder and harder for our kids. Stress leads to anxiety. Anxiety leads to depression. And as that continues, depression doesn't lead to anything good. And that's why we see the increase in the end result of extreme depression. Suicide is on the rise, not even just in teens, but in young adults as well. This is a big deal. Now, we can go all doomsday. Oh, you know what it is? It's the culture of the day. That mainstream media and all those rap R&B, all those people there, there's all this garbage that they're throwing out there, messing with their heads. And we can blame all that we want, but whenever we blame, like I've said before, and this drives my wife crazy, when we point our finger at something else, when we blame, got three fingers pointing back at us. And so here's where I might get myself into a little bit of trouble in some circles. It's so easy for us as the church to blame society and blame culture. But when we blame, we do not accept responsibility. And our responsibility, it may not be our fault, but it is our responsibility as the church to step up and to do something different. To be different than we have been in the past. See, we as the church are meant to be the ones who shape society and shape culture. Instead, we've taken a back seat and we've shaken our we've shook, done that with our finger, blaming society as we've stepped back away and we've let society and culture shape itself while we've stepped away from it, and it gives us all the more reason to blame them. We have pulled ourselves out. See, there's no one in history that has shaped culture more than Jesus. Jesus shaped our calendar. He's shaped chronological time. BC, AD, that's all about Jesus. Your weekend? See, Saturday used to be the Sabbath day. People would work Sunday to Friday. Saturday was the one Sabbath. Until Jesus rose from the dead on a Sunday. And then the church started meeting on Sunday because you know what? Sunday, great things happen on Sunday. And so Saturday remained a day off, but then Sunday became the Sabbath day. Because great things happen on Sunday. We need to not work so we can pay attention to what God is up to on Sunday. Because great, amazing things happen on Sunday. So Jesus shaped more of our lives than any of us necessarily want to admit. Even the obvious things that have nothing to do with our personal relationship with him, he shaped our calendar and our work week. We as the church are called to follow him and shape and mold society, not be victims of society. Pardon me if I preach at you. I'm not preaching at you. So I've been jumbled all morning. So I get fired up about this. This is who God has called me to be and how he's called me to enter in and maybe shake things up a little bit. We need to do something different as the church. So what is our role? How do we begin to reshape society? How do we as the church shape the culture? It's easy to go, well, there's nothing we can do about it. No, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. There's nothing we can do about it. You want to see hellfire and brimstone come out of my eyes and ears? Make that statement. Because we serve the creator of the universe. And he is every moment of every day inviting us to join alongside him. He could do it all himself. One snap of the fingers and he could reshape all the culture and society. But he invites us to join him in that. If he did it all himself, we would have no purpose in this life. But he says, you know what? I'm up to something great. Come with me. Let's do this. Let's do this together. Watch what I'm up to. Join in with me and do this with me. I've got a role for you to play. It's an important one. Don't drop it. Don't mess it up. You will mess it up, but when you do, just come back here and we'll figure it out and we'll keep going. See, sometimes we get a little bit lazy and we just wait for God to do everything, but God's like, I'm doing this through you. That's why you're here. God's saying, I have a purpose for you. And so what do we do? How do we begin to reshape the culture as the church? Psalm 127:4 says, like arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior are children born in one's youth. Notice it does not say like swords in the hands of a mighty warrior. It says like arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior. See, arrows are at best when they leave the hand. You don't wield an arrow like you wield a sword. You launch an arrow. And they fly far across enemy lines. See, arrows are not safe. Have you bow hunters? Those broadheads are not safe. They're not safe for children to play with because they can do a lot of damage. Arrows are not safe, they're dangerous. See, they're designed to take out an enemy when they're far off before they can pillage and plunder. See, if children are like swords, we have to wait till they're here, the enemy. We need to wait till the enemy is on us before we can start attacking. But what arrows do is arrows attack and take out the enemy before they begin to pillage and plunder your village. Before they begin to pillage and plunder society, arrows are meant to launch and take out the enemy before they begin to do damage. See, we've lost that. I don't know about you, but I think many of us were raised to be like swords, to never leave the hand of our parents. Generation after generation after generation, we've raised children to be like swords in the hand. And then when the culture comes and overwhelms, then it kind of feels like it's a little too late. Because the culture has already overwhelmed us. See, it's time we do something different, like arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior. It's time to change some things. We cannot do things the same and expect a different result. I think that's the functional definition of insanity. I'm beating my head against the wall, and I'm complaining that I have a headache. You can take all the ibuprofen you want, but until you stop beating your head against the wall, you're not going to stop giving yourself a headache. The functional definition of insanity is just doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And so we as the church are called to something different. We as God's people are called to do something different than maybe what we're used to, maybe even different than what we're comfortable with. But if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to get the same result. Now look around us. How many of us at some point in time has gone, oh my gosh, this culture is insane. It's so broken. There's so much darkness. There's so much evil. Oh, what are we going to do? Throw our remote on the floor. I would have spiked it if I really wanted to. Our job is to raise them up. Whether you have little ones or not, whether yours are all grown, whether you've never had them, it doesn't matter. Our job as the church is to raise them up. So there's lots of notes in your little handout. I'm going to blast through some of this stuff because I don't want to keep you here all day. We need to raise up bold, powerful, humble disciples. I've talked about this before. There's a line we cross when we say, Jesus, I give my life to you. And we cross that line and we call that, I'm now a Christian because I've crossed that line. I've said that prayer. But Jesus calls us to become disciples, to become followers of him. We don't just cross the line and stop right here. We continue moving forward because Jesus, and we'll see in a little bit, Jesus is the one who is moving forward. Jesus is not stagnant. And so sometimes we think we cross this line and I'm good right here. I'm good. I got my get out of hell free card. Just put that in here. And when the time comes, like the old Wayne's World movie, the backstage pass. Anyone that's like, that dates you if you know what I'm talking about, right? I think you have to be at least 40 to get that reference. Jesus calls us to more than taking that first step. He calls us to be disciples. And so we, as the church, whether you have children of your own or not, we are called to raise up disciples who, one, will not back down. Will not back down from what is right. They will stand for what is right in their own lives and around them and in society. We will stand up and say, no, that's not okay. Not in a condemning way. We're like, that's not okay. That's not healthy for you. That's not healthy for anybody. That's not okay. This is how we're called to live this life. To raise up disciples that will not back down from what is right. To raise up disciples who will hate everything but Jesus Christ. Now that word hate in the Bible, what that actually means is hate is the thing that you don't choose. So if you have two options, green beans or Twinkies. I hate green beans because I choose Twinkies every time. Do I actually hate green beans? No, I just prefer Twinkies. That's why my big pants are just now called my pants. They will hate everything but Jesus Christ. And always choose Christ and his calling. Always choose the life that Jesus created them, lived, died, rose again for them to live. They will always choose Jesus and the path that he's laying out in front of them. They won't veer from it. And if they ever do, when they do, they will realize, I hate this. And step back on the path that Jesus has for them. They will not back down. They will hate everything. but Jesus. Because they will see Jesus in them, around them, and through them. They'll see Jesus in their midst. Because we've done our job as the adults. We'll raise up disciples that are strong enough to withstand any adversity that life throws at them. Now, here's the tricky thing. The play on words was strong. They're strong enough. Not because they have the power, but because blessed are the poor in spirit. We'll raise up disciples who are strong enough, not because their strength is their own strength, but the strength is that of Christ in them. Remember, weeks ago we talked about blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who realize, you know what, I'm not strong enough on my own. I'm only strong enough through Christ. It's Jesus in me that enables me to withstand any adversity. It's not my own strength. I am too weak to stand on my own against the onslaught of darkness in this world. And our kids are not strong enough either. But too often we as the church, we expect them. Well, you know, I handled it. Look at me. Man, many of us adults in this room, if we had to grow up today, that scares me what society would be like right now. Because we are not strong enough. We are barely strong enough now as adults to withstand it. And that's what our kids are growing up in. But we will raise up disciples who are strong enough. In my weakness, God, you are strong to withstand anything that life throws at us. Because blessed are the poor in spirit. Say, no, I can't do it on my own. Not only do I need Jesus, but I need you. I need my church family. I can't do this on my own. We'll raise up disciples who will accept nothing less than all that God desires for them. They will accept nothing less than all God has called them to do for the sake of others. I'm going to take this momentary joy that I know isn't necessarily good for me, but I'm feeling depressed, and so I know that this will make me feel better in this moment. No, because I know that God has something so much more for me than that. Well, everyone else is doing it. That's okay. They can do that. But I'm going to stand here, and I'm not going to accept anything less than what God desires for me and what God created me to live for in this moment and stand as a light in a dark place. Raise up disciples who will be beacons of light to generations who are ever increasingly lost deeper and deeper into the darkness. See, we talked about this. We're called to be salt and light. And when it's really dark, it is our natural instinct to move towards a light source. And so we as the church will raise up disciples to be that source of light. That Jesus will be in them and growing in them, that they will be glowing in a dark place so people will see them and go, man, what is up with that? I want some of that. See, I'm not sharing this from a place of strength. Because I've failed in some of these things too as a dad. Because I can't do it on my own. I need a church family to come alongside. And I needed a church family to come alongside and help us raise our kids to be this. I cannot do it on my own. I'm not speaking from a place of strength. I failed too many times. That's why we need to do this together. So how do we do this? I've done this a few times here. So I always think we're moving ever and ever closer to Jesus. It's like merging. In South Dakota, it's so weird because they don't have merge signs. You're pulling onto the interstate, they have yield signs. How can you yield and then get back up to 80 miles an hour? That's a whole nother rant for a whole nother day. I grew up in Minnesota where we know how to drive. Just ask somebody from Minneapolis who knows how to drive. It's us. The merging. We're growing ever and ever closer to Jesus. We may never actually get there. The thing about this is we may never actually, until we breathe our last breath and join him, then we will be most united, most close to him as possible. But he's calling us and inviting us to be transformed ever and ever more into his image. So how do we do this? We will merge our lives through learning. Learning to see Jesus at work in us, around us, and through us. We ourselves, see, kids are very perceptive. More often than not, they won't pay any attention to what we say. And we all realize this because we did this when we were there, and now we see it. If you have kids, you see it in your kids today. They don't listen to what you say, but they pay attention to what you do. They don't listen to the things you say to them. They listen to the things you say other places, and they mimic, and they follow that. And so how will we do this? How will we begin to shape the culture, and how will we raise children, raise disciples who are all those 5 things? The first thing we need to do is we ourselves need to learn to see Jesus at work in us, around us, and through us, and let that be seen and known. So we need to learn how to pay attention. The thing I'm so disappointed about, in my office right now, I have a little white canvas. It's just a little one. I had a bigger one where I was pastor before, and I don't know what's happened to that one, but a little white canvas in my office right now, and I meant to bring it home with me on Friday. And on that little white canvas are white stickers that say, "Pay attention." Now, a white canvas with white stickers on it, you hold it up, and if you look straight at it, you can't see a thing. But if the light hits it right, or you kind of change your perspective a little bit, you can see that it actually says, "Pay attention." You look straight at it, it looks like it's just a blank canvas. But, see, years ago, a mentor of mine had one of those, and she's like, I have this in my office. And so I've always had one in my office. And so what we need to do, we need to learn to pay attention. Sometimes if we look from this perspective, how we've always looked at something, it just looks like a white canvas. But sometimes we need to look and let the light hit it a little bit differently, and then we see that it's, I see something like I've never seen it before. So we'll merge our lives through learning, through serving others, because Jesus calls us to live our lives for the sake of others. We will serve each other. We will serve our kids. We will serve this community. Because that's what Jesus did. He didn't come to serve himself. He came and gave of himself for the sake of others, and he invites us to do the same. Merging lives through developing, not just growing. Growing just means you get bigger. Developing means you get more complex, mature, more well-equipped to live the life we've been created to live. See, so often in Christianity today, we think that if we just fill our heads with more information, that's what we're supposed to do. Just pack more information about the Bible in my brain. All that does is make our head bigger. And we know what, you have a big head, that means you're arrogant. And if we don't let that information go from our head into our heart and help us to grow and mature, all we become is a danger to ourselves and others. We're spouting off all this knowledge without having any understanding of there are people in our path of destruction. So we'll merge our lives through developing, growing more mature as people. Developing in our maturity, in our depth, and in our understanding of who Jesus is and who he's called us to be. Through experiencing Jesus, through experiencing love and grace and mercy through our lives in community and in service to others. See, I can't give what I don't have. And so how can I share the love of Christ if I've never sat and soaked in it myself? How can I offer grace and mercy if I've never received that for myself? So we need to experience who Jesus is. We need to sit in Jesus for a while and get some Jesus on us so that we can share the Jesus that we have all over us, in us, around us, and through us. I say every prayer I end. In us, around us, and through us. It's not in me, it's not coming through me. And so we ourselves as the church need to begin experiencing who Jesus is in community and in service to others, not just filling my brain. And we'll merge our lives through following Jesus. Not just choosing him. We got to choose him first. But don't just choose him once. Become disciples. Now notice all those words. I always say God is the God of the ing. We are to choose him and then keep choosing. Those are imperative words up there. If I'd put them in the Greek, I'd put them all in the imperative form, which means do it and never stop doing it. Never stop learning, never stop serving, never stop developing, never stop experiencing, and never stop following. How will we change the culture? How will we change the lives of an entire generation? Be the people of the God of the ing. See this Bible? My Bible ends with Revelation, but then at the end of Revelation, there's a blank page. It says notes. But I always think this book didn't end at the end of Revelation. This book is continuing in and through and around every single one of us. So don't let this just become an old book that sits on a shelf somewhere with our kids. Let's live that. Let's live through the revelation. I often ask people, if the Bible was still being written, which one of you, your story would be in here? There's tons of stories of who God was and all the things that he did. But one of those worship songs, see, I always tell Mark's like, what song do you want to listen to? Or what song do we want to have in worship? And I say, I don't know, God's calling you to something. And he picked the perfect one because one of those songs was talking about, that's who you were, God. You did all that in that book. But you're the same God yesterday, today, and forevermore. What God was up to here, he still is up to. In us, around us, and through us. Don't let it end here. It continues on in all of our lives. So how do we do this? What does that mean? How do we raise up disciples that are those 5 things? How do we live in that way? There's 3 things. Lots of lists. I apologize, but I don't really apologize. I just say that. Very rarely do I say things that I don't mean, but that one, I said it and I realized I don't really mean I'm sorry. We need to help our kids learn to see Jesus at work today. Don't just tell them Bible stories. Tell them Bible stories. Share with our kids Bible stories. Because if we keep telling them about the things in this book with our flannel graph, which I saw one in the office when I started, I'm like, that is awesome. But I want to see your face on that flannel graph. And then Jesus with you on that flannel graph. It's not just Jesus with those disciples back then. That's just an example of what he did and what he is up to right now. So we need to help our kids learn to see Jesus working in us, around us, and through us right now. We ourselves need to pay attention and ask our kids to pay attention. Ask kids questions sometimes. How did you see Jesus working today. Did you see Jesus this week? Kids will come up with the most amazing things if we give them the opportunity. They will see things that we will never see. But Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me and do not stop them, for it is such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs." Kids will notice Jesus working in ways that we would never imagine. It is for those such as these who see God working. But they won't know to look for him unless we encourage them to look and see, what is Jesus up to in you, around you, and through you? Talk. Ask them. Encourage them. See, in all the research I've ever done talking about how we mold and shape kids, how we help kids overcome all the obstacles in life, outside of Jesus, there is no greater influence than the parents. Now, maybe that's common sense, but we can't subcontract out the lives of our kids to somebody else. Parents have the greatest influence. Kids are very perceptive. They see and hear what we don't realize, and that is, not going to lie, scary as a parent, right? I have an old pastor that used to say, hurt people hurt people. So it's in my nature. I am a hurt human being, and so it's in my nature to hurt people. But he would also say, changed people change people. Redeemed people redeem people. So let's be, we're hurt, but let's be healing. Let's change so we can be changed, so we can then change. Let's be redeemed so then we can be ambassadors of redemption. See, when kids see active, practiced faith in their parents and other positive influences at church, they begin to move. When kids see active, practiced faith, not just knowledge, when they see active, practiced faith in parents and other positive influences at church, they begin to move. See, and there's so much research. And the research in those people that remain in church into their 20s, those that beat the odds, that beat the statistics, those that remain in church into their adulthood, there's one common theme throughout all of the research. And I think it was George Barna narrowed it down to this one sentence, that versions of this sentence were said thousands and thousands of times in those interviews. And they said, at least one adult from church made a significant investment in me personally and spiritually. Outside of just mom and dad. At least one adult from church made a significant investment in me personally and spiritually. Now, if you take a moment and you think, who is your handful of people? You're here today not because you just happen to be driving by. Oh, there's cars there. What's going on there? You're here probably because there were people that made significant investments in your life. I can think of mine. I was shooting hoops in the church parking lot because my mom and dad had a meeting. And out comes this goofy guy wearing like his dress shoes and like a sport coat. His name was Jason. And he goes, hey, playing a game on 101. I was never involved in the youth group. I think I was a sophomore in high school. I was one of those that had decided. I had already decided, first of all, I'm confirmed, so I graduated. But my mom and dad make me come back. But I was basically counting down the days till I get to just not do this thing again because I didn't see the purpose. This goofy guy named Jason came out and said, I'll play in a game of one-on-one. He goes, I'm not normally a betting man. This is what I'm going to do. If I beat you, you got to start coming to youth group. And I said, all right, but when I beat you, You're never going to bother me again. See, he was a new youth pastor at our church. And so here I am with my basketball shoes on. I thought I was a pretty good basketball player. And he was wearing his sport coat and his, I don't know, back in the day, back in the, early 90s, late 80s, they called them jazz shoes. Kind of, like the pointy dress shoes. They're like, it's like an ice rink on the bottom of the shoes, okay, it's ridiculous. Don't, younger people, don't even look them up. They're ridiculous. And I'm looking at this guy thinking, this is one way to get my mom off my back, because then I can say, no, the youth pastor promised I'd never have to come again. He kicked my butt so hard. I couldn't make a shot, and he was like doing this weird Michael Jordan stuff in his suit, like behind the back and up and under, and what in the world? And from that moment on, I came to youth group, and Jason invested in my life. See, I was lost in the darkness. I was so lost. This dorky human with his sport coat and his stupid shoes came out and smoked me in a basketball game and continued to pour his life into me because he saw something in me. And God saved me through Jason. See, back at VBS years ago, we had this little lesson in the little science room. We had a big marble, and the big marble was God, and there were other marbles around, and we said, okay, these are our lives. Sometimes our lives aren't moving, and the big marble is God, and we roll God, and God has some momentum. And sometimes when God bumps us, he bumps us, and he starts moving, he moves us in his direction. See, and as I'm sitting there, and I'm teaching this little lesson to this pile of elementary school kids, and it hit me. We see all these tragedies going on in the world, and I think of like school shooters, and it's a horrible, horrible thing. And when I see that, my heart breaks. My heart breaks for the victims, my heart breaks for the families, but my heart also breaks for the person. Because how many of us did God nudge us and push us in their direction so that our marble would then bump their marble? Because as our marble gains momentum from God bumping it, then we're called to bump other people's marbles and start moving them in God's direction. So when I see those things happen, I think, how many of us missed our opportunity? How many of us took a step back and said, no, not me? How many thousands of times did God nudge us in the direction of those people to bring his love, his grace, his mercy, his redemption? But we stepped back and we said, no, that's not for me. That's somebody else's job. That's why we pay the guy up front. It's his job. See, we miss out on opportunities God is inviting us to step into. So we help them learn to see, and help them learn to see that God is up to something in them, around them, and through them. And God is moving us in the direction of others. Then we help them to learn to notice, discern, and respond to his nudge. God is always bumping us, nudging us in his direction. Sometimes he's nudging you to nudge me back into his direction. And if we're being obedient, if we're learning to notice and discern and respond and move, I truly believe that if we as the church notice, discern, and respond to God's nudge in our lives, we will see less tragedy in this world. But when we take a step back and we absolve ourselves of any responsibility, leave the world to its own devices, you've gone too long when the kids come back. That's why I was nervous early on. But I fear the number of missed opportunities in my life. The number of times God has nudged me to step in and bring somebody hope, bring somebody redemption. But I was afraid that I might say something wrong, or I might do something wrong. God doesn't care if you do it wrong. He just wants us to do it. And we'll never do it right if we don't do it wrong and learn how we did it wrong. But I can never do it too wrong Because God's more powerful than I am, so any damage I will do, God can redeem that. All God wants for us to do is respond and step into those situations where we are uncomfortable to bring his hope and his love and his grace and his mercy and his redemption. But too often we say, no, that's scary. Let's not be afraid. We serve the creator of the universe. Nothing. So we need to help our kids by example. They'll see us doing that. And then by conversation, talk with them about it. Share the stories. And then the other one, help them to know Jesus. Not just know. Remember in the Bible, know means an intimate understanding. Help our kids to not just know about Jesus, but to experience him. See, our role is to help them see him, come to know him, to guide them, to walk alongside them, to equip them, to encourage participation in his mission of love and grace and mercy and hope and redemption in this world. That's who he's called us to be. That's what he's called us to do. He is inviting us. He could do it on his own, but he wants us to do it with him. This isn't done. This is living on today and tomorrow and every day. The story of Jesus and God's redeeming the world is in you, around you, and is meant to flow through you and us together as a church. Let's not step away from our responsibility. We've lost the hearts of generations of people. Let's not lose the hearts more. See, engaged hearts engage minds. You don't engage somebody's heart by filling their head with information. But you do engage their imagination by engaging their heart. We need to help them by our example and our investment in them. See, transformation happens when our hearts are engaged. So let's be the church. Let's live out this life that God is inviting us to live. Let's be that. So those around us will see it, they will experience it, their hearts will be engaged, and then their minds will begin to transform. That's how we can change a culture. Will I see the change in the culture in my lifetime? Probably not. See, that's the great thing about arrows. Some of our kids may not move far geographically. Hi. Some of our kids may stay close geographically. Do you want to come up here? It's a perfect example. No? See, as soon as that weird guy who's got a really loud voice starts moving towards me, you back off. I get it. But our kids can launch chronologically. I may not see the change that I want to see in the world in my lifetime, but my hope is that I will invest in enough people and I will pour my heart and my soul into enough people, young and old, that then God's work will continue on long before I'm breathing anymore. See, arrows are meant to fly far. Some of them may go geographically far. But our prayer is that our children will go chronologically farther than us. One of the greatest tragedies in this world is when a parent needs to bury their child, because it's not supposed to be that way. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they're old, they will not turn from it." What is the way? Jesus is the way. See, the Christian movement back in the biblical times was known as the way. What is the way? That means following Jesus. It doesn't say start children off on what they should know. Start them off on the way they should go. Teach them what following Jesus looks like. I'm going to close with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Erwin McManus. He wrote a whole book about, I just forgot the name of the book, but it'll come up on the bottom in a minute. But in the intro to the book, he wrote this to his kids, and this is my prayer. For not only my kids, but our kids. You are the tip of the spear. You are the future. This is your fight. We pulled the bow back as far as we could, and we gave you all the strength we had to send you into flight. Fly far and true, cross enemy lines, hit the mark, set captives free, and keep striking until the battle's won. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. Thank you for my church family that lets me talk for a long time. Pour out my heart and my soul, and Father, help us to be your church, because our kids are way too important to leave them. We got to love them too much to leave them where they are. And so, Father, help us to follow you and help us to lead our children. Help us to be lead followers. We lead our kids by following you. We lead generations of people by following you. Help us to be lead followers. Because we can't do this, but you can. So, Father, help us to be faithful to you. We love you. In your holy name, amen. I'm all jumbled in my head. So as we enter into communion,